Hi, my name is Debra Richardson of Debra Richardson LLC, and I work with you to help you clean up your vendor data, clean up your vendor processes so that you can pay the right vendor. Now, this week's Vendor Master File tip of the week is trust but verify. And I'd like to say, one, I love this saying, but two, I did not make it up. I think I heard it somewhere back in the early 2000s at a church service. So I didn't make it up, but it is very applicable to the fraud that is going on now in accounts payable and particularly in the vendor setup and maintenance process. So let me tell you how I remembered this saying because it was very applicable to the conversation. So I was on a panel this past week and we were talking about fraud. And so I talked about two instances where the vendor team may receive something that looks very legitimate, but it's not, and they need to make sure that they do the proper validations and authentication. And so someone responded to that saying, trust, but also validate. And I was like, trust, but verify. And everybody loved that saying. And again, I didn't make it up. I heard it from somewhere, probably a church service back in the early 2000s. But it is very applicable to the current situation today. And let me explain those two scenarios that I was talking about when the trust but verify came up. So the first one is that fraudsters have learned or as a result of the phishing attempts, the successful phishing attempts from, when folks, including your vendors, right, when accounts payable teams and the vendors abruptly went home as a result of the pandemic, fraudsters took advantage of that and they sent out lots and lots of phishing emails, and they were very successful. And as a result of that, they had the login credentials for both probably you and your vendors. And if the vendors in particular, use that same password for their company email address as they use for other things, then your vendors could have been a victim of email account takeover, meaning the fraudsters were in their legitimate email account. And so when as a vendor team member, if you receive a request from your vendor and it really is from your vendor's legitimate email address, you still can't trust it because it could be a fraudster. So you need to verify, and we'll talk about how in just a minute. The second scenario was with internal employees, and internal employees, we think that, you have that comfort that if you do not receive that internal or external email indicator, that the email is from your internal employee. But there have been alerts out there that have said that fraudsters now know how to remove that external email indicator. And so if they are sending a spoofed email of your internal employee's email address and you don't see an external email indicator, you could think that that spoofed email address and that spoofed email is from your actual internal employee. So what do? Trust, but you also verify. So two different scenarios, same issue is you need to always verify who you are communicating with, be it phone or email. And so how do you do that? Well, I do have a process in my authentication, validation, management, three-step process that I use for my clients for setting up vendors and changing details on existing vendors to make sure that you always pay the right vendor. And so authentication is one of them. And it's the same as if you contact your bank. Your bank is not going to just talk to you about whatever you contacted them about. First, they are going to authenticate that you are who you say you are, and You need to do the same thing with your vendors. So that is trust, but verify. So what I will do is I will link at the end of this video more information on how to authenticate your vendors, because I do have a vendor master file tip of the week on authentication. I think it was earlier this year where I posted that, so I'll link to that at the end of this video. So make sure you watch how to verify. And again, trust but verify. Now, if you would like more information on how to improve your vendor process, please make sure you go to my website at debrarrichardson.com. I have lots of free tools and resources so that you can avoid fraud, regulatory fine, and just overall bad vendor data. So good luck, and be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to be notified next Tuesday when I post the next vendor master file tip of the week.